Hello, everyone. Welcome to Threpticon. This is my channel where I talk about the cultural history of veganism and share my own experience. So today, let's take a look at the Foliatanes, otherwise known as the Foliants or the Foliensis. So the question is, can you eat only leaves? The early modern religious order, the Foliatanes, or Foliant, whatever name you'd like to give them, tried to eat a leaf-based diet, maybe, or at least a diet that was very, very restrictive. So we'll see how well um, that experiment, what kind of results it gave. So this name Foliatanes, I've only found it in one source really. That was Francis Bacon. Basically, he had this book where he was talking about human health, and so the title's there. You can see it: History, Natural Experiment of Life and Death, or the Prolongation of Life. So anyway, this is a quote from that book. Nourishment ought to be of an inferior nature and more simple substance than the thing nourished. Plants are nourished with the earth and water, living creatures with plants, man with living creatures. There are also certain creatures feeding upon flesh, and man himself takes plants into a part of his nourishment. But man and creatures feeding upon flesh are scarcely nourished with plants alone. Perhaps fruits or grains, baked or boiled, may with long use nourish them, but leaves or plants or herbs will not do it, as the order of the Foliatanes showed by experience. So that's interesting. Bacon presents an idea of beings feeding themselves with elements that are below them, like plants feeding on minerals and water, and animals feeding on plants, and et cetera, et cetera. So while on one hand he does praise sort of simpler nourishment, he is doubtful. He says, perhaps fruit or grains, which are more dense, caloric plant-based foods, as Bacon claims, baked or boiled, may with long use nourish them. But these leaves, these things that are 100 calories per pound, all sorts of salads, herbs, plants, they're not gonna cut it, right? They're not gonna work. And according to him, the order of the Foliatanes showed by experience. So let's take a look. Who were the Foliatanes? Otherwise known as the Foyant congregation. So, as we can see here, and I know this is the best source, but um, it describes the situation. So the Foyants, they had some dietary laws, right? The Foyants renounced the use of wine, fish, eggs, butter, salt, and all seasonings. So that means, all spices, things like that. And their nourishment consisted of barley bread, herbs cooked in water, and oatmeal. But they also did a lot of other ascetic things that were very hardcore. They didn't eat at tables, they ate on the floor, they slept, they didn't sleep in beds, slept on the floor. Um, their habit, their monastic habit was simpler, etc., etc. They prized manual labor, and they had just a very severe ascetic kind of lifestyle that did attract people at the time. So it was beneficial for the community. I don't know, to walk around, I saw these emaciated people who seemed extremely um, durable, let's say. They seemed extremely well adapted to all of the hard labor they were doing. And it inspired religious feeling. So anyway, we can take a look at another source here from Sartorius. Um, so I like the title of this book. It's kind of like a pun. Cistercium, Bistertium. Anyway, so here this just verifies what we had just read. So they're talking about the rules that these Foliensis, these Foyants had, and as he says here, they abstained from meat, eggs, fish, wine, oil, salt. All right. Okay, so that shows you a little bit more about their habits. So the originator of these strict dietary laws was a gentleman named Jean de la Barrière, and he, was a monk. He sort of took control of this order at a certain point. He instituted a lot of reforms, and a lot of them having to do with these lifestyle things. Um, so for a while, he kind of, it seems, kind of went wild. He turned into a wild man, said to have lived initially on wild herbs and roots and what fruit he could gather, denying himself even the simple sustenance of bread and wine. He later added dark bread to his diet, but continued to shun not only meat, but also fish, eggs, butter, oil, and salt. He went bareheaded and barefoot, without even sandals, whatever the weather, slept fully dressed on bare planks, and ate while kneeling on the abbey's bare floor. So you can kind of get the idea of what this gentleman was like. He did everything to the extreme. I mean, he shunned all sorts of food. He tried to sustain himself foraging. Um, I don't know if this was urban Paris that he was foraging. I picture at that time maybe you could find, I don't know, figs, pears, apples, grapes, but those are very seasonal. So what's he going to do in January, February? Um, very difficult, very difficult. So these dietary laws, they worked initially to gain followers. However, there were some revolts due to the strictness of the rules, and this caused them to be relaxed. So anyway, the new rule allowed the monks to eat eggs and fish, as much bread as they wanted, and wine in sober measure. They still abstained from eggs and fish on Wednesdays and Fridays, on fast days declared by the church, and during Advent and Lent, and retained a token austerity in promising to eat only cheap and common fish. So I can picture they're not eating these fancy sturgeon, they're eating a common carp or something like that, such as poor people might buy. Servings of fish were in addition limited to 4 ounces, and eggs 2 per meal. Bread was likewise to be common in quality, and all the food was to be prepared simply without the addition of sugar, cloves, pepper, and other spices. Um, so, I mean, this describes still what people today might consider a very healthy diet. They weren't adding sugar or, well, today spices are considered healthy by some people, but um, they weren't adding those extra non-necessary items. They were just eating the basics. Though they did include animal products, and the reason being, in my opinion, is the diet described before was just too poor in calories. I mean, it was just too sparse. It wasn't sustainable. It was like a weight loss diet you would see today. All right. So, in my opinion, the moral of the story is definitely we have historical records of a vegan diet. It has existed, and it has existed for a long time. Though it wasn't vegan for the reasons, philosophical reasons that many people are today in this particular case. In this case, asceticism was the motivation for the dietary choices of the Foliants, and as is described even in the first citation by Bacon, it seemed to be like an experiment with some negative results. So that leads me to conclude that very restrictive diets are difficult to sustain long term for entire communities. Some people can keep it up for a long time. Jean de la Barrière probably kept it up for many, many years. However, for the entire community, not so easy. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye bye.